It's Mike Monday here on this Monday morning here in Sydney, Australia, with your nearly daily dose of information, inspiration and insight to get you motoring in and out of the studio. And today I'm going to talk about that thing where you have 500 versions of the same track and you don't know what to go with, how to avoid that and how to think about it. But before I answer this, I've got something for you to download if you haven't downloaded it already. It's called 7 Top Tools for Massive Music Momentum, and these tools are all about removing the obstacles in and out of the studio so that you can actually focus on finishing music, which is obviously the key to everything. And they're probably not what you think unless you've already downloaded them, of course. And you can find them at mikemonday.com/7 Top Tools. And when you get the download, there's also another free surprise on the other side if you want to sign up for that. So this is a question from Jack Richardson, and he said, I always make about 10 different versions of the same track and then get confused and start messing about with effects and EQ and then can't decide if I want to go with the heavy mix or the lighter mix. Now I'm sure we've absolutely all been there, and this is one of those questions. In fact, the vast majority, actually, of questions I get, and in fact, I'm sure the vast majority of questions you ask yourself, if you actually look at the question itself, the solution is right there, embedded in the question. Because, essentially, if you get confused and start messing around with the FX and EQ and then can't decide if you want to go with the heavy mix or lighter mix, then what is the solution? The solution is not to make 10 versions of the same track. I know. That's like almost too simple, but it's a very simple solution to the question. It's just don't allow yourself to do that. You see, when I started making music back in 1994, after I left university, started producing music, everything was outboard. There wasn't anything in the computer, but the computer was simply a glorified sequencer. So there wasn't any mixing or any audio inside the computer. So you did the mixing on an actual mixing desk. You had to. There wasn't any option. And unless you went to a proper expensive studio, those mixing desks weren't motorized or anything. So when you did a mix, you had to finish the tune right there and then. There was no coming back to it, because if you started another tune, you'd changed all of the settings, all of the EQs, all of the settings. Everything about the mix was gone. And you had to leave a sign on your desk saying, please leave, do not touch, if you hadn't finished the tune. So finishing a track, mixing it and finishing it was a hard endpoint. I mean, there were times when we had to come back to it and try and redo it, but it was an absolute nightmare. So one way of proceeding in this situation where you can do 5 billion versions and completely get yourself completely confused is to pretend you are under those conditions where you have one chance and just maybe one tweak chance, and then when it's done, it's done. It's almost like you're kind of creating this situation where you're creating limitations for yourself and thereby avoiding all of these problems that you will have going forward. You see, the problem is with the ability to do lots of different things and have loads of different versions is that you think that, oh, I'll just try this, or I'll just try that, is creating solutions, whereas actually what you're doing is you're just creating more questions. Oh, I'll just try this, but that creates 2 more questions. And so you go along this path, but then that creates, and eventually you just end up with these 5 million different options and you're completely confused. If you think of, this is a good way of looking at it, if you think of every tweak that you are doing, every change that you are making, it's not creating a solution, it's creating more options. You will start to limit those tweaks. I mean, when everything started moving into the computer, into the DAW, which seemed to be like, it was like, oh, I can't believe this is amazing. Well, this is, everything's going to be so much easier, and in many ways, it is easier. But it meant that I started doing different versions. So when everything was on the mixing desk, on outboard, I would have maybe 2 or 3 versions of the same track, and that was it. You had to record it onto a DAT tape in my day, so that was what you had to do. Two or three versions of the track, and then that was it. It was done. When I started recording different versions at different parts of the process, what I actually found was what I call going around the houses, which is the creating millions of different versions and see which one is better, actually didn't work. I mean, this happened time and time again. You would think it would, wouldn't you? That if you try everything, then you can choose which one's the best. But that's just not the way it works. What I found invariably, after comparing the version before going around the houses, trying every available option in every possible way, the option before that process was, 90% of the time better than the version at the end of that process. And it took me, just shows you how foolish us human beings can be. I mean, it took me banging my head against that particular brick wall of spending days and days and days going around the houses, trying loads of different versions for me to, and being proved time and time again that the version before all of that wasted time and energy was better. I mean, in some senses, the other versions were better. So maybe something was clearer, maybe something was slightly better, maybe this was kind of developed in a slightly better way. But that the process of going around the houses had sucked something out of the initial idea. So after years of doing this, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to stop this. And as a result, my music improved immeasurably, even though it was less perfect. I got a lot more done. I made a lot more progress. So think of every version that you're creating as not a potential solution. Think of it as a potential. You're just creating more options for yourself. So that's the second thing. The third thing is, when you are going around the houses, as I call it, trying all of these different options, why are you doing it? What's the reason? I think the reason is that we've got this kind of itch that we had to scratch. I remember when I actually decided to stop doing that process, actually stopping myself from doing that process was very similar to not scratching an itch. You've got a bite or something, but we all know what happens when you scratch an itch. It gets worse. It doesn't go away, it just gets worse. Actually, scratching the itch makes it worse. Because what we're doing is we're looking for satisfaction. But the thing is, in going around the houses, in scratching those itches, you will not ever find satisfaction, or at least you will very rarely find satisfaction. So what do you look for instead of satisfaction? Instead of scratching that itch, what you are looking for is improvement. So instead of the satisfaction question, is this right? Ask yourself the improvement question, which is this better? And if you don't know if it's better, which is perfectly possible, then my solution in that situation was to go with the first version, because that's more likely to be better than the post-itch scratching version. Okay, so don't chase satisfaction. True satisfaction in creative work, if you are a great producer, if you're going to be a great producer, is actually impossible, I think. Just chase improvement, okay? And then the other thing you've got to bear in mind is our ability to remain objective. So I wrote a blog post about this. If you want to look it up, I think it's mikemonday.com/the race or something like that. But basically, the longer you spend on something, the less objective you can be. So you're kind of in a race with, I called it a race with boredom, but probably a more accurate is you're in a race with your ability to be objective about what you are doing. The longer you spend on something, the more subjective you are becoming, the more kind of attached to all of these different things about it, the more kind of focused on these tiny little details you tend to become, the less objective you can be. So think of the amount of time you are spending as you are kind of running out of objectivity. The more versions you do, the more confused you are making yourself, the less objective you are being. So that's a really good, helpful way of looking at it. And then the final thing you've got to think about, and this is kind of at the root of the whole needing to find satisfaction, all the different versions, is you've got to think about what is it that you are avoiding by needing to create all of these different versions. What you are probably avoiding is the inevitable judgment, whether it's good or bad, maybe self-judgment, but maybe judgment by others. That comes from finishing something, from actually saying, do you know what? This version that I've done now is done. And this was the great thing about the outboard mixing thing, the fact that when it was done, it had to be done, otherwise you had to get everything back up again, was that it forced this kind of facing the inevitable. And the inevitable is, the only thing you can be certain of when you're finishing something is that it will be judged by you, in the future, and by others possibly as well, if you decide to play it to others. So you've got to think about what you're avoiding. You're avoiding that fear of judgment. And if you are, and because you are kind of coming closer to that fear of judgment, the closer you get to it, the doubt will increase. Your mind, your lizard brain will throw up all of this kind of, is it this, is it this? And in trying to make everything perfect, you are avoiding that fear of judgment. So this is why I often suggest to use your resistance, use that increasing feeling of doubt at the pit of your stomach as a signpost. You need to finish, move towards it, go into it, lean into that doubt. When you zoom out and look at the thing you are working on right now, whatever that might be, that piece of music you're working on right now, in the context of your entire career, I can guarantee you it is not that important, no matter who you are. Even if you're a big superstar and you've made a massive hit and this is your next track, in the context of your broader career, it is not that important. You are only as good as your last track, which might make you think it's really important, your next track, right? But if you are only good as your last track, that means you've got another opportunity, the next track, okay? So it isn't as important as you think it is. I mean, I think some people have an idea that they spend, if they write something they're not proud of, which I can tell you, I can promise you, the majority, like 80% of the music I made, I was not proud of. I'm not proud of now, okay? But you kind of think of it as if it's this weight you're going to carry around on your back for the rest of your career. That isn't it at all. I hardly remember half the stuff I made. I get kind of messages from people, various communications people saying, "Oh, I love this track," and talking about the track, and I don't even remember the name of the track. I don't remember making it. I don't remember how it goes. I don't remember anything about it at all. So don't feel like this thing that you make now is going to be like this kind of millstone around your neck. What it actually is a tool you are using in the moment right now to help you get further so that you can be better in the future. The process of making it is a process of getting better and improvement. So that is what I suggest for avoiding this situation of having 5 million versions. Don't. Remember that every new version that you create is creating more questions, not solving them. Chase improvement, not satisfaction. Ask the question, don't ask the question, is this right? Is this perfect? Ask the question, is this better? And if you don't know whether it's better, go with your first choice, because it's usually right. More time equals less objectivity. So, what does that say? Spend less time. And when you're feeling that resistance towards the end of the process, when you're feeling that doubt, just know that that is an inevitable part of the process because you are facing fear of judgment. And fear of judgment is processed in the same part of our brain as fear of death. So in essence, you are facing that same kind of fear. So you are always going to feel that resistance. So move in the direction of it. So I hope that was helpful. Jack, don't forget, I've got a new tool or set of tools to download called the 7 Top Tools for Massive Music Momentum. You can get them at mikemonday.com/7 Top Tools. They will help you avoid this option anxiety and help you kind of focus on finishing. And if you found this useful, if you know somebody who will find this useful, share the love, share this post, tag them in the comments or just plain tell them about it. So until tomorrow, onwards and upwards, go and finish something.